Hey everyone, I'm going to do a video on, I'm just going to call this, I guess, entities. I'm going to focus on a group of entities, but just to kind of, I guess, give a little bit of a background. So when you think about entities, there's like tons of different entities. They can, you can go from anywhere from physical things, whether they be like, you know, animals, insects, people, different races, whatever, like different kind of beings, to basically more abstract concepts like astral beings, all the way to like God forms and things like that. So the different levels to it, there's mainly like, so okay, to start, there's like on the lower level we got a bunch, you know, we got everything you see in the physical, which, you know, I just named some of them, but you can, you know, expand that to everything you see in the physical, to any kind of being. And then it goes into the actual essence of the physical being you see. So they have like a spiritual and a solar essence to the being. So you could, like, when someone dies, for example, it's like they're not in the physical anymore, right? So they still have their they have a piece of their consciousness of who they are when they're alive, but in the abstract world, it becomes more like it becomes more tied to certain memories. Usually, it doesn't contain the whole memories, except depending on what level of a being when they transition, depending how they transition, and so on. So that could be from, like, you know, the regular person who just dies unintentionally to the person who's like preparing for death, from like monks to like different kind of spirit, like different spiritual systems. It could be like in Egypt with like how they mummified and all these type of things, right? These type of people, like, they kind of are preparing for like death, and like there's a lot of groups of people that are very prepared for death, like their religions. Like when you see the Tibetans, they have the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there's the Egyptian Book of the Dead. There's like a lot of different cultures that focus on death and preparing to move on and things like that. The Mesoamericans and things like that, they have a lot of concepts of like these other realms. So for different beings, if you look at it like from a biblical, and I think from Islamic as well, from those kind of religions, like they'll talk in the Bible, talk about angels, demons, humans, basically are like the three. And essentially demons are just kind of like fallen angels. There's a lot more to them about, like, you know, what makes them what they are, but essentially they're from the same race as angels, but then they diverge, and then they become like, they fall and they become like a completely different being, because they're, you could say, like kicked out of, they're like a fish kicked out of water, like they're kicked out of the realm they're from, so they have to do different means and mechanisms to survive and gain energy, instead of like an angel, for example. Angels usually don't stay on Earth for that long, because they have to, like, they live in certain realms. To the realm they kind of like exist in, they get fed into that realm, like in that realm, through other means. But then on Earth, like, for the most part, if they're fallen, they have to like to stay at the same energy level as like an angel for the most part, or like stay up in energy. They have to do like a lot of the demonic and satanic things that you see with, like, when it comes to like vampires, which are all kind of in the same school or in the same class for the most part. Like when you see like vampires, gargoyles, demons, all these type of things, they're kind of feeding, like the concept of vampire feeding off of people, with like feeding off people and like with their blood. And people talk about like energy vampires, so that kind of gets more to like, I don't know if you want to call it the demonic school. So like demons kind of feed off other beings and things like that energetically. So it's almost like an upgraded vampire. Gargoyles are kind of like in a simple sense, they're almost like in between a vampire and a demon. Like it's kind of like a vampire upgrading to become like a demon, in the sense. Like if you look up vampire with wings, it'll look like a lot like gargoyles. And then when you kind of think about demons, it's just like you can see the resemblance in their appearance. But I'm not going to really go into details about that. And then demons, you can look at them as like they're just like imbalanced, and they're more magnetic, so they're trying to just like pull in more energy for the most part, and just keep pulling in energy to, it's like kind of like a black hole, or almost like like just kind of like a vortex. Like you're trying to just like pull in energy out all the time, and you're not really trying to give any energy out. So that's kind of from the demonic part of it. And then angels usually be more balanced, but they'd be giving off their energy as well a lot more. And the people who can like, I guess, work and control demons a lot more, it's like they know how to actually extract the energy they can from the demon without getting some of the negative side effects or pawning off those negative effects to other people and stuff like that. But that's a whole other thing about that. So that's from the biblical, it's like demons, angels, humans. And then from Islamic, I think it's for the most part angels, demons, jinns, and elementals. And that kind of gives a broader view. And the jinns, I'm not really going to get into that. They're more earthly, but I'm not going to really get into jinns at all. I think I have them in some playlists too, like videos about them, so you can look in probably like the Kabbalah or like the Dimensions playlist or something on my channel. I have like different playlists, so one either called Dimensions or Kabbalah. There's videos about jinns, so you can learn about them there, but they're not demons and they're not angels. They're like a different being itself. Like angels were made from the darkness, but they're made of light from the darkness, but they are of light. And then demons are kind of more back into the darkness because they're just kind of more pulling energy in without giving off their energy, which is more electric and light type of energy. And then jinns are more of fire, but a smokeless, odorless fire, like a fire before fire on Earth, like fire that doesn't need air to burn. Like it's a different kind of fire. So jinns are kind of like they're different. And then there's hybrids in between. There's like shaitanic jinns, which are like hybrids between demons and jinns, but that's like a whole other thing with hybrids and stuff like that. But then elementals kind of go into beings that are from the elemental realms, like water, air, earth, fire, spirit, but mainly just we're going to talk about the 4 elements. So water could be like, when you see beings and we're talking about more like astral, not like physical anyways, with all these anyways, astral, elemental, and things like that. So like for water is more like mermaids, mermen, like whatever, like those kind of creatures. Fire would be more like dragons, salamanders, stuff like that. Air would be more like fairies and I don't know, like harpies. I guess you can almost even put angels as kind of elemental as well. They have an air elemental aspect, so the bird wing, like the wings and stuff like that, probably depicted. But they have more than just air element as well. But and then for earth, there would be like dwarves, dwarves or gnomes or whatever, and I don't know if I want to put elves into that also, but ogres, like this is kind of like the more European fantasy kind of aspect of things, right? So those are kind of like elemental beings, but elemental beings essentially, like on the essence of it, they have the essence of the actual element that you're talking about. So like that's why they exist in those different realms. And then there's hybrids as well, but that's like still whole another concept, so we're not going to talk about any of that stuff. But the focus of the video though is not going to even be about a lot of the stuff I'm mentioning right now. It's going to be kind of like I'll get into it in a second, but like it's going to be more about like the kind of like the fallen, it's not going to be about really demons, it's going to be about like more of these astral type of beings that be kind of feeding on people. Kind of, some are like, it could be a bunch of different energies, but they're essentially doing the same thing, so they can be classified as different things, but they're all kind of doing a similar thing. So I'll get into that in a second. But with the elemental beings, when you look at like different god forms and different cultures and things like that, because every culture kind of has their own god forms and way of looking at things, unless it's like a monotheistic, but like all the polytheistic at least type of or pagan or whatever type of cultures, they deal with a lot of the like if you see like Poseidon versus like, I don't know, Neptune, which is more like Greek versus Roman, which are pretty much very similar anyways, they're like the exact same. But Poseidon, Neptune, and then you get into like, I don't know, like just really like any water god of like any other religion. Like if you look at like one god that represents an element of any religion, they kind of they all kind of embody that element, but then they're mixed with cultural influences to be whatever god they are of that culture, which still do exist, but it's like people basically who, if you have a group of people like a society, and they don't understand how to work with elements and like work with nature and work with a lot of like what's around them and things like that, what happens is a lot of times they get passed down, like people that are higher up in understanding in that same culture will kind of associate the energy to basically like a type of god form that they kind of like, that's more created, but it still exists, but it's like more created out of belief and things like that. You can even watch the film American Gods that talks about like a lot of this type. It puts a lot of this type of stuff into kind of a good perspective, but and it even talks about like New Age gods, which would be like a lot to do with like technology, media, and like surveillance and a lot of things like that. So it's a pretty good show to understand a lot of that. But basically they'll create like a name, let's say again like Poseidon or whatever, to embody the energy of the element, so that people who aren't like able to access the element directly, they can access it through these god forms. But then it kind of got mixed up with too much with like personality worship and like and kind of like a religious kind of way of looking at into it, instead of like actually the essence of working with it. So it kind of becomes all jumbled together in a sense, and the purpose kind of gets lost in the practice, is the easiest way to put it. So basically it's about like, I'm going to do another video talking about this whole like about like the fourth kind of like the fourth dimension, about like illusion, you can call it Maya. Basically I'm going to talk about more of that in another video, just all about that. That'll probably be the next video I do. But when you get past this whole realm of like illusion, like this fourth dimensional kind of astral, like this illusionary astral aspect of things, and then you get to an aspect where it's like a fifth dimensional, more of like, we both have like fourth dimensional astral kind of be more like your personal dreams that just relate to how you see things. Fifth dimensional would be more like kind of like astral projection, remote viewing, like things like that are kind of more like related to it's like an objective realm almost more. Like the fourth dimensional is more subjective to you, but the fifth is more like objective to kind of everybody in a sense. It's kind of like we can both see the same thing, might have like slightly different ways to describe it, but essentially we see more like the same type of thing. And that's kind of like how people around the world, if they like access that same type of fifth dimensional realm, they're going to be accessing this elemental realm. But people who don't really have access to it, they need to access it on like lower realm. So it gets presented to them through ways of like, you know, these different god forms and these different things, right? So that they can understand it from where they're at, because they don't have like the natural ability, the gnosis, to get to the level of understanding, you know, these abilities, or yeah, they just don't have like a certain factor like that makes it so that they can understand it on like at this level, or even just the energy to understand it at that level. So this fifth dimensional level. So from this fifth dimensional level is kind of where like the elemental beings are like in its pure essence. So even when you see things like mermaids and like all that type of stuff that I was just mentioning, it's kind of still like it's still something embodying an energy. It's not really the essence of just the pure energy in general. So this even goes into like why you go into like elementary school, junior high school, university. Like these words like elementary is to actually like kind of introduce you to elements and things like that. Junior high is kind of like getting you prepared for the higher knowledge, and then it's like and it gets you more advanced into elements and like these type of understandings. And then in high school, it's more about understanding these higher knowledges and kind of like picking the field you're gonna focus in. And then in university, it's kind of like exploring like the universe of whatever field you're into, or like the entirety of the realm of you're into, and it's kind of like expanding within to like the universe in general. So it's like, but the issue with a lot of people is they don't understand like they're not seeing behind the veil, and that's the veil is like kind of like that fourth dimensional. You can even look at it as like, it's also on another higher concept, the veil, but on one level it's seeing past the illusion, the veil, and then being able to see like what's actually being taught to them. So a lot of people when they're going through school don't understand a lot of these things. So if you see like the show Sabrina, Wizards of Waverly Place from Disney or whatever it was, Family or whatever channel that was from. Like those type of shows, you see like wizards or like witches or whatever from like, they're basically all in high school. So it's like you kind of get into this more, you get past the astral, which is like that veil, and then they're basically working within these astral, like these fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional levels in these shows, and they're working with like all these type of things, and they're kind of showing you that there's like more behind the scenes, or like that's kind of has to do with the Age of Aquarius with Apocalypse, Revelations, right? Revelations and Apocalypse means the same thing, which basically means to reveal, and it means to uncover something. So even Scooby-Doo is kind of about that. That's why like in every show they kind of like uncover who's behind the scene, and it has a lot to do. They're all really similarly like tied like on an essence level what they're trying to teach you, but that's kind of what Apocalypse, Revelation, and like 2012 and Judgment and like what's it called? Like that's kind of what all this is about. It's kind of like seeing behind the veil and then basically getting to the next level of kind of like higher learning and higher knowledge, and also higher application of that knowledge with what's behind the scenes. So a lot of the things in school is like people couldn't see behind the veil. That's what a lot of these like with mystery schools, secret societies, there's a purpose why they hide a lot of things like beyond what I'm about to say. Like a lot of it has to do with people diluting and distorting and screwing up the spiritual systems to kind of like kill those spiritual systems. So a lot of them are hidden for that purpose. So, but at the same time, it's also to improve like kind of like mystery or mysticism, like which is like problem solving, like kind of like Scooby-Doo is like they're probably problem solving and seeing behind the mystery of what's happening. So it's kind of like to build your problem solving skills, which is being able to see through the veil or that fourth dimension or that illusion type of thing. So that's why there is a lot of illusion, because that is an element of the planet too, like fire and water combined, makes that steam or that mist, which has to do with mysticism, which has to do with illusion, which has to do with the veil. So seeing beyond that veil is kind of like how you can not get tricked into any basically like agenda or for someone else, or be doing something for someone else, or like basically be tricked into not understanding what you're seeing. So like even in school, like I was saying, a lot of people weren't understanding what they're learning from what the message they're getting. They were seeing it below the veil, so they were seeing it on one level, but if you could see past the veil, you'd see it eye to eye on the level it's supposed to be, and you'd be getting like the knowledge you're kind of supposed to be getting. But since people can't see beyond it, like it creates problems for that individual person, but at the same time, it's also to help you be able to always see beyond the veil, because you have to live in a way where like you're always seeing beyond that veil, or else at any point you could be put under that veil and be put into an illusion, right? So back to like the whole entity thing. Now so like dragons, like all that type of stuff I was talking about, the elemental beings, they're kind of still like an embodiment of an energy, so you can understand the energy more about how they play out. Because a lot of people need more like physical examples and more just really physical examples of what something is to really understand what it is beyond the veil, which is kind of weird because you're still understanding it from like under the veil perspective. So I guess it's just building yourself up to get to a level. But so those things I was describing, that like dragons, harpies, gnomes, mermaids, all that is still like an embodiment of that essence of an energy. It's just kind of like examples of how it embodies itself in the physical. So now when it comes to these entities I was going to talk about, so I'm not going to talk about demons, like kind of about demons, kind of more like half-breed type of demons, but not really like full-on demons, because that's kind of what has to do with quarantine, and that also has to do with the this age about kind of getting out of quarantine and all that type of stuff, which it has to do with why people are in quarantine right now as well with corona, which has to do with kind of like the aura of the sun and light codes and unlock hidden messages, and usually those things that are hidden is beyond the veil or under quarantine. So it's all tied together, which that's a whole other conversation. But the like full demons, most people like you can't really interact with them directly because they're like that's what hell kind of is. They're like separated, which is in like a whole separate kind of quarantine. Like it's completely separate. Like you have to go to those realms to actually interact with them, and you can't really bring them here. Eventually they'll be able to get out of there, but that has to do with like this age, but that's again another conversation. So more it's like half-breed type of beings that are kind of like not really like they can kind of maneuver in this realm. So it's not really about understanding the deity that's doing the mischief, because again, like a lot of the stuff I'm talking about has to do with that veil or like that mysticism or that like it's kind of like I don't 100% equate mysticism with this because it's not like I'm bringing in like kind of like the negative aspect of it, but it's like that veil or that illusion. A lot of it has to do with mischief and like deception and trickery and these type of things. So now when you see things about like let's say when you see things like possession, right? Like full-on possession is more like demonic control. So like when people are like fully like, and this stuff is real, I've definitely seen possession and all this type of stuff. So this stuff is real, but people want to say, oh no, it's like fake. It's definitely very real. Like people do get possessed, there's exorcisms, all that type of stuff. That stuff is very real. That's like, when you see people like when you see a possessed person, there's no other way to put it than they're possessed. When you see people like, I don't know, like levitating, doing all this weird shit that they do, and like their body like doing all their like unnatural, like completely unnatural things, like it's definitely possession. Like there's no other way to put that. But they're like full body possession, that's more of like demonic control by more of like kind of like half demon kind of entities, or it could even be like these other entities. But a lot of times, like again, like people who get like under demonic control, a lot of times like when they astral project and get out of like their own body, because a lot of times people who get under demonic control have these type of abilities, they kind of go to those realms themselves unknowingly or by being tricked, and then it's like a body swap. So it's like that but there's many different levels of demonic control, which that's again, this video's not even really about that. So there is demonic control, like possession, which is like just straight up bodily possession, where like what you've seen like Exorcism of Emily Rose, like that type of possession, like where people are just full body possessed, like they have no control of anything, right? Like some other entity is literally in complete control of their body. Then there's like another level of possession, which is more like I could be talking to you about, let's say if I'm just explaining, let's say if I'm just like start making videos about I don't know. Actually, yeah, I don't even have to make it personal. Like, it's pretty easy to understand. So, instead of like your body being possessed, it's like your mental is being possessed. So you're still in control of your body and things like that, but these beings more control like you're on like the mental plane. So it controls you like, not even on the mental plane, but like on the mental level. So it's like they control kind of like what you think about, or kind of like incept, not even like. They could even like incept into you like what you're gonna like what your thoughts are gonna be about. So you think it's a genuine thought of your own, but it's not even your own. It was like planted there, and then you only thought of that thought because of like your suggest. So it's like a higher level of hypnotism, and then you start being the embodiment of an energy that's not really it's not really for you. You're basically being tricked so that you can like carry out something else's agenda. So this type of control is still like. This could have to do with like jinns, this could have to do with astral beings, this could have to do with a lot of things. So also one type of entity I didn't even talk about was aliens, right? And when it comes to aliens, like there's pretty easy ways to get around aliens and stuff like that, because with aliens, like just like a lot of these aliens will not tell you about like outer space, and they won't really tell you about like a lot of the things that you think like an alien would like kind of teach you about. They're more like shape-shifting beings that kind of just trick you to get out again another type of agenda. So that's like again like a whole other topic that's not even really. It's actually it's pretty much this topic, but I'm not going to really focus on the whole alien thing. So when you see people, for example, that are embodying like this whole like hyper-feminism type of thing that's imbalanced, right? I've seen some people from the alien point of view say that's like Andromedans influencing people, which Andromedans, you can almost think of it like the Amazon type of woman, almost like type of energy, but um, like Wonder Woman, Amazon type of woman, like you can almost say like that's an energy that people will sometimes embody when they're not actually like, they don't actually like care, like it's not even for their benefit or they don't really care for it too much. They can embody it to like, basically they're being like the spokesperson for that energy. It could be about, it's basically like a high level of mind control. It's like another type of possession though. And a lot of cultures talk about this type of stuff. So it could be about, it could even be like a patriarchy thing, but I can't really put that to, if that happens, that's more like it already happened and it kind of led to the place we're at today. But it could be about, it could just be really any mental concept that like, I guess it could be like the alien thing, like I was mentioning, like it could be a being kind of like shape-shifting and appearing to be one type of thing, and then it's to kind of still carry out a personal agenda for itself. And it's all about you not being able to see through the veils of this like fourth dimensional type of stuff, and they're controlling you kind of, they could be on higher realms, but they're mainly controlling you through the fourth dimension. Like it's all kind of fourth dimensional control. Like some of them is just like demonic possession is like a whole other thing, which is like they straight up just take your body. But again, that's not what we're talking about. This is more like controlling your intellect so that it controls what comes out of your mouth almost, and then at that point it guides also what you do from a day-to-day point of view from that point on. Like if someone is like, one day they're talking about like Wicca and witchcraft and all this type of stuff, and then another day they're talking about like aliens, and then another day they're talking about like, I don't know, like Egyptian and then native. So like they could be being controlled by different spirits, and they're kind of just being like a walkthrough almost for spirits, and they're kind of like just being controlled to like get out a message for different entities. So a lot of these things has to do with the land you're standing on, because a lot of spirituality, again, like with shamanism and these type of things, a lot of it has to do with the actual ground you're living on, like the motherland you're a part of, like the aspect of the earth that you're from. Like if you're in Norway, you're not going to be really like, if you're trying to practice like Yoruba spirituality in Norway, it's not going to really, like it doesn't really match the land you're from. Like it's not really going to have its power or match it at all. Like the land they have to be connected. So this is even how kind of South America and Africa are connected in a sense, because of like the connection with voodoo and like all that like type of Santeria and all that type of stuff is, even though it's hidden within Catholic like figures like of Mary and stuff like that, but it's more of that energy is kind of shape-shifting and hiding behind things, like kind of get away from, like hide from, it has to do with like colonization and like Christianity being forced and all that type of stuff in South America. But those energies itself, like with voodoo and Santeria and all that type of stuff, it ties into like a lot of the, you can tie it like to like the Yoruba and like those type of spiritual systems in Africa, and they have similar power like within the different lands. But voodoo is still like a combination of multiple different spiritual systems, because of the combination of like the combination of different spiritual systems put into it from the combination of different tribes of people from slavery and all these different things. So those mixing became like kind of how voodoo works with different deities and all this type of stuff. But with those different lands, like they work like those two, they're like Africa and South Africa are definitely, or South America and Africa are very tied together. So they work there. But other than that, for the most part, like if you're, let's say, like if you go to a land, like a lot of people in America, like for example, like you can easily start getting you can easily, if you're connected to the earth element and in a sense the water element, it can really come through any element, to be honest, but mainly like the earth and kind of water. You can, if you're on a certain land, you can start connecting to the spiritual system of that land a lot more than where you're actually from, because of the spirits of the ancestors of that land is in that land, because those people were buried there. Like when you see a lot of ghosts, oh yeah, and those are entities I forgot to mention too, like ghosts and things of like those natures. But when it comes to like spirits of ancestors, a lot of the ancestors are tied to like when they come, like if they want to kind of come back, a lot of times like it has to do with like their actual grave, like when you go visit someone's grave, you know, of like someone that you lost, right? Their energy is obviously going to be tied way more to where their body was buried, right? So when you have a whole culture of people buried in one land, like you're going to pick up the spirits of that land way more than, like, especially once you get disconnected from your own culture, you're going to, if you're disconnected from it, you're going to pick up those spirits a lot more than if you're, like, it doesn't really matter where you are. Like if you're a person in Africa and you're not from Africa whatsoever, you're probably going to start picking up the energy from that area, because it's kind of just how water flows. Like when you pour a cup of water into like the ocean, it just kind of becomes one, right? So it's kind of like the same thing. You if you grow up among a group of people, you're going to act like that group of people, because you kind of flow. You're going to flow with that group. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of how life works in general. So with spirituality and things like that, you are going to be like, for the most part, influenced by the land you're on. So if you travel a lot, you're going to be able, and you're able to actually like, you're more aware of spirits and things like that. You're going to be able to more like pick up on the spirits of the different land you're on. So if you're in South America, North America, Africa, Australia, Europe, Asia, doesn't really matter. You're going to pick up on the spirits of those places. So if you travel to Asia, you're probably going to start like, and depending on where you're going, like if you go to Thailand or Vietnam, wherever, like you're going to pick up on the spiritual system of that place a lot better than someone who's never been there. So it just, you start getting connected to lands that that you might not even be from, but because you were there and you're like more connected to that earth and water element, you're going to pick up the spirits of that place. So they kind of, it's like they get attached to your aura in a sense, and then they kind of work through you to speak their piece or to continue their legacy for the most part. Like that's pretty much just how it works. So especially on a land where like a lot of the spirits were done wrong, like they're gonna, and if they're getting ignored, they're gonna work through a lot of people to kind of get their piece across, you know? So there's a lot of different agendas of why spirits will work through people, but when it comes to kind of what I'm getting at, like, so when it comes to like timelines, parallel realities and all these type of things, so again, like, let's say you, and I just use this because it's like the easiest way to understand it. Let's say if you're to decide, like you're not like in good shape or anything like that, and you decide I'm going to exercise every day for the next, well, maybe not every day, but almost every single day for like, you know, take rest breaks and stuff like that, but I'm going to exercise consistently for the next year, right? 2 years, 3 years, whatever time period, 6 months, however long. And then there's a version of you, like you get into the flow and you build momentum and you keep doing it and you keep doing it, right? Then there's a version of you that says that, but then it's like, you know, and then just something happens and diverts you off of that path, and then you let that overtake your will. Whatever externally happened overtakes your internal will, so now you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then every single day something happens that could be even less substantial than the first thing, and then you, now that your will is lower, you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that. And then you don't actually do what you're going to say what you say you're going to do. That's in a sense the same kind of thing. It's like these external events that are influencing you to not do whatever it is, it could be so many different things like that are doing it, but at the same time it's still something controlling you from an intellect level, and then to an astral level, and then to a physical level of what you are or are not doing. And then 10 years later you're looking back at your life and, you know, looking like, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that, and then regret, and then like these type of things take you over. So these are the type of things I'm talking about with like these mental things and so on and so forth. So this can go into a bunch of different levels. So if a person is like, if a person, let's say, is like you're like you could be someone coming from a low point in life, right? And you're really trying to build yourself up, but then every single day, like something, like you get like way more kind of interference, or you get way more like obstacles than like another person, and the type of obstacles you get could be way more dramatic, way more harsh, and they just like are out of nowhere, you know. So these type of things like are kind of what I mean, and they're trying to push you into certain. They're trying to push you into like certain understandings. Yeah, I got cut off there, but basically what I'm saying is like, so you can be coming from like a low place where, like early on in life you were struggling with, I don't know, it could be like just not being satisfied, being unhappy, like slight signs of depression or even actual depression. I don't know, suicidal thought, like could be so many, like you could be traumatized as a kid from, you know, like external things around you, whether it be school, family, whatever it is. And then you could also have like, due to all your external environment as well, you could have like through like society everywhere, like anything external from you, you could have like low defense systems to dealing with a lot of these things, right? So what happens is a lot of times it's like these, like just look at these entities as literal just like energies, or just like look at like depression as an entity itself, like these type of things. This is kind of what I mean. So it's like they could have like a slight grip on you at one part of your life, and then you start to get out of all this type of stuff, right? And then you get a lot of obstacles because first of all you're also learning how to overcome these type of things, right? And it's always kind of like those obstacles are always there. You just have to have a strong defense and strong willpower to always kind of like fight at all times. It's kind of just how life works, right? But at the same time, you could it's like almost like these entities like don't want to let you go. Like when you see in horror movies and towards the end, like the demon, like if it's like kind of getting pulled away like from the person, right? If it's getting pulled away from the person, they fight harder to kind of stay in control of the person, and they always do like it's called like a flickering light kind of energy. Like the movie starts with them flickering the lights, and then they feed off your fear. So like you get scared of the flickering lights, and they start like moving objects around, like closing doors and all that type of stuff, flipping chairs, or there's like a horsey type of thing like rocking, and then you start seeing like, so you get more scared, it gets stronger, so it has more powers to like materialize now, right? Because first it works with like usually electrical appliances, then inanimate objects that are easy to, you know, control its will because it's inanimate. Then it starts working like where you start seeing its reflection in mirrors, or you start seeing it in reflection. It's because the astral world is connected through, the astral has to do with the dream world, and like the water realm has to do with mirrors and reflection and things like that. So you start to see its reflection in things, right? And then you feed it more. So now that it's like getting stronger and you're getting scared, right? So like you're going lower, and it's actually it's getting higher, you're going lower, right? Now it's starting to meet you in the middle, and once it can meet you in the middle, this is kind of when it possesses you and all this type of stuff, right? So then once it has like its grip on you, it's like once it has its claws dug in on you, then there's like other external people, like there's like the Ghostbusters of the movie, or like, you know, whoever joins the movie to like save, you know, like a priest trying to like get the demon out of the body, whatever. There's external people now helping you because you can't deal with it yourself. So then after that, the demon does way, because now it has more power, so it starts like it's being way too magnetic, right? So it's just trying to take your energy, but now since it's just been taking energy, you can pull out some energy to try to stop the other people, right? So then basically once it's sunk its claws, it does more dramatic things to try to pull you in. So that flickering light energy, it's more of like something to trick you with that veil kind of thing I was talking about, astrally in the fourth dimension. It's something to trick you so that you feed it through fear or whatever it could be, or you could just feed it in any type of way. Even when white people do racist shit to piss you off, and then you do something like out of like defense or whatever it is, and then you get in trouble for it. It's kind of like, that's literally, I relate that all to, it's the same energy in essence, like for what's happening. Like if you take the physical part out of it, it's the same essence of the energy of what's happening. I just call this like flickering light energy. It's just like this trying to feed off your fear type of thing. So with the mental and the astral, like these kind of just like, it's just kind of how it works. So once you start like overcoming something that had its like teeth sunk into you from like a child, or from even at whatever point. Once you get to a certain point, like a lot of weird or dramatic things might happen through other people to bring you back down. Because what happens is like once you start overcoming like these entities and things like that, and they can't work through you anymore, and they can't just like affect you internally to make you act whatever type of way so that like, you know, you feed them. What happens is it works through other people to try to bring you back down as well. So that it basically just like, yeah, it basically just does whatever, like there's a ton of different things, but it can work through other people to try to bring you back down to a certain level so that once you go down, it can take over you again. So yeah, a lot of this also even relates to gang stalking and things like that, because the only reason like gang stalking kind of exists, like there's like the physical level of it, and one thing to look up for a lot of people, if you don't know about it, look up fusion centers. Fusion centers are a very big part of gang stalking, which I'm not even gonna, like, they're at the bottom of hospitals, and they're kind of like CIA, or if you're in Canada, like CSIS, which is Canadian CIA. The intelligence agencies of whatever country you're from, they kind of like, they'll work in like the bottom floor of like a hospital or whatever place it is, right? And you can look this up. This is just like an official thing online. It's with the Homeland Security and it works with the government and whatever intelligence agency. So you'll have people dressed up as like whatever, like let's say if it's in the bottom of a hospital, you have people dressed up as like doctors, whatever, and like they'll be walking in and out, but they're not even working for that actual place. Like they're working with this kind of gang stalking thing, and it kind of ties into so it can go from literally from neighborhood watches to the police to these fusion centers and like then intelligence agencies, so everything in between like CIA and police, like all these different things. All of them have to do with like kind of gang stalking and things like that. And now the real thing about targeted individuals, which I'll get into in a second real quick, because so there's a spiritual level of this, and then there's a political or like a systematic version of this, right? And when I talked about the whole demonic thing, right? So I don't know, you probably didn't think all this ties together, but when I was talking about the demonic thing about them like kind of feeding off people and all this type of stuff to even exist in this realm, like you wouldn't have all these satanic, you know, cults and satanic systems if they didn't work. So like basically it's almost like a systematic demonic system so that they can keep getting energy fed off them, or they can keep feeding energy, like in that kind of vampiristic way I was talking about. So the only reason like this targeted individual stuff is like, the only reason there are like targeted individuals is because certain people, when they're like reincarnated and all that type of stuff, right, they're born with a certain amount of like chi energy and so on, right, like higher than the average amount of have higher than the average person. So because of that, because most of the, like the people, not most, but some of the people that are born with this higher energy, if they're not like born with the, you know, the knowledge of who they used to be or whatever, they are born with this high energy but no way to protect it and all these type of things. So then it's almost like they're just like, if they're like, these demons could be like fishermen and you're just like a giant fish that's swimming like right on the surface and you're kind of like standing still. It's like you're easy prey basically, and big, like you're like also like big game energetically. So the reason why like a lot of these things happen to people, whether they be in the physical with like all the different types of, with the gang stalking and all that, or in the spiritual, is to bring you down energetically with that like kind of like flickering light type of thing I was talking about, so that they can feed off you. And once you get to a certain level, if something can occupy your vessel, then it can raise this energy up to like the level you, like the untapped potential you're not reaching, and basically utilize you for whatever agenda. Like utilize, it's almost like possessing like if you're possessing like a regular person versus like a high energy individual. It's like possessing like a citizen versus like the president, which like just like that dramatic kind of comparison. I'm making that dramatic comparison just so you kind of understand like energetically, like one is more useful than the other, right? So that's kind of where gang stalking and TIs and all that type of stuff fits into all this type of stuff. And with the government, it is systematic, and there's a lot of there's a lot of demonic things and like like covert and like crazy stuff going on with like this pedophile, like all this crazy shit going on with the government and with like the businesses, the CEOs of like whatever businesses that run a lot of the systems in globally around the world, because it's not really like the government's controlling things, it's almost like the people who have wealth behind that are usually controlling a lot of that, and then behind those people have to do with a lot of like I don't know, like how to simplify this, but not really like kind of secret societies, but like perverted secret societies is the way to word it. And then behind that, there's like immortal societies, and it has to do with like demonic entities, and there's a lot of crazy shit going on. It's just the easiest way to word that. So it's almost like the demonic thing, like there's like a systematic way to, there's like a systematic control, there's a control system in place by these demonic entities. Like that's the easiest way to put it. And they're using human vessels to do all these type of things. So then when you get into like the sex trafficking and all the traumatizing things that happen to kids, is to create basically a and with foster care and all this type of stuff. So like but mainly like the sex trafficking and all that, there's a lot of these rituals are to basically create like an empty slot in a person. It's like in Get Out when he goes into a sunken place. It's to create like a split personality or create like an emptiness in a person so that they can be, if they're empty, then they could be taken over. So it's like creating a vessel for certain beings. So that's what, it's like a pyramid scheme of possession. Like you have possessed people creating possessed people to make more possessed people. It's like an unnatural birth type of thing. It's like beings that cannot reincarnate, that are trying to use, and the only reason why they are trying to possess people is because they can't incarnate, because they're not following like the order and systems of things, and they're kind of quarantined off. So they're trying to basically create systems for people to, like a systematic way for these beings to basically incarnate in vessels, is the easiest way to put it. So I didn't even think I was going to go in that direction with like about all these entities. So that's like, but I knew I was going to focus on these type of entities that are messing with people. It's usually to carry out agendas and put people into crippling situations. But then on the highest level of it, it's to make people vessels, but at the same time, it's also to make the people that can be used as these things are also the people that have the most potential to, because of their energy capabilities, they have like the most potential to fight these things as well. So it's a very large problem. It's a very large problem. It's a very large like system in place. So it can go through all different cultures. It can go through every different race. It goes into every single different level. So, and this is also why every third world country in the world, even if they're whatever Asian or white or whatever, like if they're like Mexican, like they're almost like, you can look at them as like still people with, they still have melanin to an extent. So it's like the people that are very, like there's no third world just white countries. Like the rest are like, every third world country is of someone of color, like a country of like a melanated country, or like people who have slight amounts of melanin. They're like mixes of melanated people and these other people. So it's like, yeah, there's a whole reason why this is all systematically like that. It's because like melanin has a lot to do with energy and so on and so forth. And it can go through people of all different races, including some people of within these first world countries as well that aren't melanated, but at the same time it's, yeah, this all ties together. And like how I said, like to be in a third world versus first world country has to do with classism and economy and money, right? And the people behind a lot of these things have the most amount of wealth, which are running a lot of these orders and societies and all these type of things. And at the same time, the only way you're going to understand a lot of these orders and societies is, the best ways to me, at least, to understand a lot of these things is understand Hebrew, like the language, and to understand the Gnostic school of study of whatever system is keeping you oppressed. Is the easiest way for me to for anyone of systematic, like kind of like a place of like this kind of pyramid scheme where you can understand people at the top of the pyramid, they had a lot of the information as well, so that you cannot reach their level. But if you kind of level up in your knowledge and and your ability to utilize the knowledge, then the information that is necessary for you next will still appear to you somehow. So it's really just about you transforming yourself consistently and improving it. So yeah, also shout out 603 Joey, because and there's a few other people that want me to talk about this, but he wanted me to talk about this, and it ties into a lot of the stuff he's been saying. So I think, yeah, and there's also a video I did called just called Satanism, and it talks about some of the rituals and stuff they do, which has to do with like war and like mass bloodshed and all these type of things to feed these other entities and things like that. So I talk about it a little more. This is probably something I'll continue more and more and talk about a little bit, but I think for the most part I explained everything. Oh, and this isn't to get religious on everyone, but there's a reason why also every single person, not every single person, but this is why this is why basically people are afraid to even mention the Bible or read the Bible and all these type of things, because it's almost like once you're aware of these beings, like you can fight them, and it's like basically like you put a light on them, so the darkness kind of sheds. It's like it's like you if something's under a veil, it's like you can't see it. So when you put a light on it, you put a spotlight on it, and it can only exist really in this kind of this hidden darkness type of thing. So when you read things in the Bible, a lot of these words will literally expel certain things out of your body, whether you believe it or not. It's pretty simple. So basically, the rise of this demonic system is also the collapse of not just systems that use the Bible, but a lot of spiritual systems around the world. So yeah, that's kind of and with Revelations too, it's for the first half of Judgment, it's supposed to be the demons rule, and then the second half is when the angels kind of start doing more and more. So first half is a few years, so it's still a few years with that, but yeah, I don't want, this is already long enough. I want to make this 20 minutes. It's 40 something minutes, so I'm just gonna end it there, and I'll probably just do another part and kind of build on this topic. So with that, peace.